Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. So today I am exploring Lima, Peru. It's an interesting place, interesting city. A little bit different from some of the other cities I've been to. However, different in different ways. And today, as we're walking through, we're going to have a little bit of a different discussion. Today we're actually going to discuss humanity from a different perspective. You know, when I was on this channel, we talk about a lot of things that are spiritual and worldly, and in some cases otherworldly. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about architecture. You're going to say, "Wow, where are we going with this one today, Anthony?" Well, let me take you on a journey with me. This journey is going to span some of the architecture of this metropolitan park. You're going to see behind me this beautiful little gazebo building with all of the intricate detail. You know, some of these buildings, they're 100+ years old, and in some cases, maybe a few hundred years old. You know, it's similar to when you go to a lot of countries in Europe, how the architecture and some of the buildings in Europe are, well, in some cases we're told older than the United States. And the reason why this is important and what dawned on me, because I started walking and I started thinking about and queuing up some things to discuss, and then, as I mentioned, sometimes the content is just gifted to me from the universe. I walked by this building. This building was I would say it's probably the Justice Department. And I took a picture of it because something stood out. You see, originally, I grew up in the Midwest, and I spent quite a bit of time in St. Louis. And St. Louis has always been interesting because, there was a World's Fair in St. Louis. And so some of the architecture in St. Louis, is in some cases almost kind of a Parisian design. And, some of the older buildings are just absolutely gorgeous. But then as I've traveled the world, I've thought, I see buildings all over, architecture all over. And you would think that when you view the world and you experience all of these different cultures, that you would experience completely different architecture. And I'm going to give you an example. I know that a lot of South America was highly influenced by Spain, as probably as well as Portugal. And you'll see right here, this little building here, which has I don't know if you see behind me the arches with the red bricks. And see if we can get a closer look here. When I see this, it reminds me of places that I went to when I visited Spain, like Alhambra, because the color scheme, the colors, the bricks, and the design of the arches are very similar. Yet, this building here, I don't know how old it is. And I could probably go in and find out, and I may, wait a minute, or I can just look at this little thing right here. This is not a very old building, but you can see that it's got a Moorish design. That was where I was going with this, is it's got a kind of a Moorish design. And some of that Moorish design could definitely come from the influence from Spain, as Spain had a lot of Moorish influence on it during the battle between the Moors and the Christians many years ago. But I digress. Back to my original statement. So this old building, it was a huge building. I'm not even near it, so I can't get you an image of it. But I'm sure if you put down Ministry of Justice in Lima, Peru, you'll see the building I'm discussing. And this building looks exactly like buildings that were built for the World's Fair in St. Louis. which are also similar to some of the buildings in other cities that were supposedly built for the World's Fair. The problem that I have with this, and I know some of you probably already know where I'm going because you've probably already gone down the World's Fair rabbit hole, but the problem I have with this and where I'm going with this is, you know, as I started seeing this building and I thought, wow, that building looks literally like I could pick it up and drop it in the middle of St. Louis and you wouldn't even know the difference. Where did all this come from? Meaning, I know some people are going to say, well, you know, some of these are more Roman designs and it's from the Roman influence, but you see, what we're taught about history is Rome wasn't this far. You can go, well, maybe it was just built a couple hundred years old and years ago, and it was from more the architecture from Rome. But then I would ask, okay, if that's the case, why? Why then? And why is it that these buildings that we've built now to represent these different eras of architecture are not our own? And why are they the same everywhere in the world? Why did some person in Lima, Peru decide he wanted to build a building with the same exact design as somebody in St. Louis, Missouri? You see, these appear all over the place, and I have to say, I don't think it's coincidence. And the reason why I don't think it's coincidence is, even when you look at this building, you think, oh, well, maybe that building's older, but then you start to see the little things like this, like the red in the bricks here. It's not, it's more painted. The gray and the red, it's more painted. It's not the color of the brick, which is what you find when you see all these other places. So you can see that the building material and the design was very, very cheap compared to, you know, these historical sites you see all over the world. So back to the question, which is, why is it that these architects built these buildings in completely different cities and completely different countries, and they all have the same design, the same kinds of designs? You see, if you've gone down the Tartarian rabbit hole, you might think one thing. If you go down the World's Fair rabbit hole, you might find another thing. I just find it curious. I also find it curious that, you know, when you see these buildings and they were built well over 100 years ago, they're built, they say 125 years ago. They didn't have the same technology that we had. They literally, we're told, had a horse and buggy. Yet these buildings are so much more gorgeous, beautiful, sturdy than anything we build today. And you have to ask yourself, how is it that people who supposedly had less ability and technology could build buildings and would build these beautiful buildings even more gorgeous than we can today, which meant it took a lot more time and energy and effort to do it, yet we've decided to completely switch up and go a different direction in how we build. You see, everything nowadays is built to be cheap. It's not built to last necessarily. Yet these stone buildings, they remain. You know, it's interesting that we've used cement in construction for many, many years. I mean, ever since, even from my understanding, the architecture in Rome. Roman cement was the strongest cement ever made, which is why a lot of these buildings that were built in Rome remain standing today. And also why a lot of when you travel around the aquifers, same thing, they remain standing, because Roman cement was made differently. Well, they just discovered in the later years how they did it. And they added, it's because they added lime to the cement, and what would happen is the cement would crack and water would leak in. The lime would then, I don't want to use the word melt, but it would essentially dissolve into the cracks, and then it would harden. The lime would harden and it would solidify the concrete. So my question is, how did we forget this technology since we use concrete so much? And why don't we use that today? Because it seems much more effective. And if these cement buildings can last so much longer, then why would we not continue to use that construction? You see, architecture is something that usually changes between cultures and over time. Yet what I'm seeing now is, and what's being shown to me now as I walk through these cities, these countries, I'm starting to see similar architecture with similar design that bears no difference in culture. It bears no difference based on the construction of the culture in the area, and that pauses for question. So I'm going to explore more of the city and see what I find out. But what say you? How do you feel about that? When you start seeing, or when you view pictures and images of construction across the world, and you start seeing certain buildings that are very similar in design, does it ever have you pause and start to question? Does it ever make you wonder why we made the choices that we made? As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I am truly grateful. And until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. I hope you have the most amazing day.